Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cabin-Smith. Tonight, Burundi remains troubled by unrest. Hundreds of pupils are sent home from school over scribbles on a photo of the president. Elsewhere, at least 3 people are killed in a mishap with a grenade. Also, the debate around changes to Moroccan laws about abortion continue. The government's already approved a more liberal amendment, but the details still have to be thrashed out. And hundreds of people every year are killed in clashes between Fulani nomads and settled farmers in central Nigeria. The violence has surged this year as climate change puts pressure on the availability of fertile land. Well, tensions caused by President Pierre Nkurunziza's 3rd term in office are still stirring up trouble in Burundi. On Tuesday, 230 students were sent home from sitting an exam at school for defacing a picture of the leader in textbooks. Teachers in Ruyigi province say that pupils refused to say who'd done it. Now, dozens of schools have reported similar graffiti. And earlier this month, police clashed with students in Muramvia after young people there were arrested for drawing on portraits of Nkurunziza. Now, the country was first plunged into crisis in April last year, and outbreaks of violence continue.
The incident took place in Ngozi, in President Pierre Nkurunziza's hometown. Until now, there had been no protests in this region against him running last year for a 3rd mandate. The authorities said a soldier tried to carry out an attack. A grenade exploded in his hands, killing him and 2 civilians. Several people were wounded. The explosion occurred very close to a school.
The school children were getting ready to salute the national flag. It was around 7:30 when, on the parking lot by the school, a grenade fell from a soldier's pocket and exploded.
The ruling party is holding a national congress this weekend in Ngozi. Some sources say the party will designate a new leader. Pierre Nkurunziza was elected president for the 3rd time in July. The announcement in April 2015 that he was running for a controversial 3rd mandate sparked a wave of violence. Since then, more than 500 people have been killed and 270,000 have fled the country.
Now, Eritrea has accused Ethiopia of working with foreign powers to orchestrate evidence used in a recent UN report that accused Asmara of crimes against humanity. The document called for a referral of the case to the International Criminal Court. Now, 16 years after the end of a war, and the countries remain bitter rivals. Eritrea also accuses Ethiopia of timing an armed attack this week to maximize the impact of the report on Asmara's sovereignty. While Ethiopia, on its part, claims that it was Eritrea who is behind the clashes in the border region of Tsorona. It's warned its neighbor to back off.
And our forces have already achieved their mission, and they have returned to their barracks within Ethiopian border. Whether the Eritrean regime will next decide to regroup and try to do something stupid, that is ultimately their choice. But that will have very grim consequences.
Well, in Morocco, on Tuesday, discussions about the liberalisation of abortion laws continued. The government has already backed amendments that would make it easier for some women to resort to the measure. And eventually, it will be up to Parliament to decide on the fine-tuning. Margot Chevant brings us more on debates as they continued on Tuesday.
The modification of the penal code in Morocco legalizes the abortion under certain conditions. First, in case of a rape or an incest. Second, in case of a fetal malformation. And then, if the mother suffers from mental disease. Today in Rabat, NGOs gathered to talk about this future law. Among them, the Dr. Shribi, the leader of the movement that claimed the legalization of abortion for almost 8 years.
I
don't know if there will ever be a total legalization. I mean, why not? I hope there will be. But what we will need to work on is prevention. This proposed law is a great step forward and brings us satisfaction. It proves this is a democratic state where the government listens to the people. That being said, what we would like is for Article 453 to include the insurance of a physical, psychological, and social safety and allow the pregnant citizen to have a safe abortion.
Puisse donner alors à la citoyenne la possibilité de faire un avortement sans risque.
Today in Morocco, between 600 and 800 illegal abortions take place every day. The abortion under certain conditions is the first step for the Moroccan society. Now we're waiting for the vote of the law at the Moroccan parliament in the following months.
Well, it's been difficult for me to forgive Oscar Pistorius. So says Riva Steenkamp's father, who broke down before a sentencing hearing on Tuesday, saying that his daughter's killing could not go unpunished. It was the first time that Barry Steenkamp had testified in Pistorius' murder case. The South African Paralympian has always said that he mistook Riva Steenkamp for an intruder when he fatally shot her in 2013. Now, his conviction was changed from manslaughter to murder last year, and prosecutors are now pushing for a 15-year prison spell. Barry Steenkamp says that he hopes that Oscar Pistorius faces a stiff stretch.
Oscar has to pay for what he did. He has to pay for it. And I don't know, that's all I can say.
How should he pay for it?
That is up to the courts, my lady. It's up to the court, and we will go by the decision that the court hands down to Oscar. But he has to pay for his crime. And I don't want to say that he must go to the maximum or whatever it is, but he has to pay for it.
In Nigeria, more people have been killed in clashes between nomadic herdsmen and farmers than by Boko Haram insurgents. Around 10,000 people have lost their lives in disputes over grazing over the past 2 decades. It's a conflict that's become worse as climate change puts more pressure on the availability of fertile land resources. Our correspondent sent us this report from Benue State.
These activists are angry about the recent deadly attacks by nomadic herdsmen that have killed upwards of 400 people in Benue so far this year. The movement against the occupation of Fulani herdsmen is gaining traction here. Many people have been directly or indirectly affected by the violence that has displaced over 4,000 people.
I'm against them destroying my farms, killing my wife, killing my son, killing my daughter, and occupying my land. Come, eat your grass, and leave. Also, do not intend or plan to occupy my land.
Fulani herdsmen wander with their cattle across the length and breadth of Nigeria and beyond. Most of the beef and milk consumed by Nigerians comes from herds of cattle like these. But the nomadic lifestyle that Fulanis have observed for centuries is becoming increasingly untenable in a country with a population of over 170 million people. In the search for grazing, the cattle often trample across farmers' crops. In turn, some farmers retaliate by stealing cattle. The situation sometimes degenerates into deadly clashes. 3 years ago, this herdsman lost his 2 brothers in a dispute with a farming community. So far, no one has been charged with his brother's murders.
Many farmers are angry with us because our cattle destroy their crops. But they need to understand it is not easy for us to control our cattle because they are cattle.
Benue is situated on a historic fault line where the predominantly Christian south meets the largely Muslim north. Politicians have yet to come up with a viable solution to the crisis. Some politicians advocate grazing corridors for cattle are the answer. But for others, including the governor of Benue State, cattle should be restricted from roaming around.
I think that the way forward is ranching, because ranching, one, we restrict the nomads from just moving all over the place and encroaching onto people's farms and all that. And that is what, for us here in the state, have been advocating.
Miles away from the hustle and bustle of cities where politicians disagree about how to solve the crisis, Fulani herdsmen and farmers continue to observe their traditional lifestyles, but increasingly in fear of one another.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Please do so again if you can. Until then, take care.
You love watching France 24 in English.
Analysis from France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news.
To the border with Algeria.
Huge lines since this morning to answer that question. But France 24 is also available in French.
14h à Paris, bonjour à tous, bienvenue si vous nous revenez sur France 24, préparez-vous.
And Arabic.
شعبية هذا الباب القادم من أمريكا الجنوبية في ازدياد
Featured on cable and satellite systems and online media in France and across the world.